It was the beginning of the autumn, the first year of the war with the Atlanteans, who had come to unknown World of Ída to pillage and burn. As it seemed, the end of summer heralded the cessation of the hostilities, but that was not the case. The summer heat gave way to night rains and icy winds, and silence fell. But it was the calm before the storm. Morning fog slowly rolled out from the Almarian forest, spreading over the nearby fields that no one had managed to harvest. A pair of Almarian warriors patrolled the edge of their own forest realm. "Did you hear that?" one of them said. After an endless long moment of silence, a flock of crows suddenly rose into the air. Both men turned around and tightened their grips on their weapons. The birds were cawing, warning of unknown visitors. Then came the sound of hooves, the sound of creatures that Almarians had never seen. The Atlantean cavalry was approaching. The Tharkans, once the most powerful empire of the unknown world on the central continent of Ída, had modest origins. What began as a coalition of herders on the southern plains gradually grew into the kingdom of supreme technological, cultural and military might. However, their greatness was ultimately undone by internal corruption, complacency and invasions by a northern nomadic hordes. From the ashes of the old empire rose the dark kingdom of Acheron, and the Tharkans, said to possess the arrogant Atlantean blood, eventually faded into the history. Today we journey back to the early days of Archaic Age, of the rise of the Atlanteans and their invasion against the free peoples of Ída. Ironically, it was these very Atlantean raids that forced the Tharkans to evolve into the war-hardened and technologically advanced power they would later become. Through fantasy world-building, illustration and character design, we will explore the lore of the Tharkans as described in the tale of the rise of the Atlanteans, their warriors, armor, weapons and battlefield strategies. Our story begins on the southern coast of Ída, a region populated by Tharkan people. The Atlanteans, highly advanced and powerful civilization, began raiding the coast. Their arrival was marked by mysterious mist and swift brutal attacks. They would vanish just as quickly, leaving only destruction behind. As they reached the fertile lands of the Tharkan territory, they decided to establish a foothold, setting up camp and preparing to dominate the region. The Tharkan king Tharsis responded by sending envoys to the Atlanteans to understand their intentions. But the invaders, arrogant and confident in their superiority, demanded the Tharkans submit their rule and pay tribute in the form of crops. Naturally, the proud Tharkan people refused, which led to the brutal execution of their messengers by the Atlanteans. In retaliation, Tharsis launched a surprise attack on the Atlantean foraging party with his lightly armed warriors, the Peltasts. Though successful at the first, Tharkans were ultimately outnumbered. Tharsis was forced to retreat, realizing the dire situation they faced. Realizing he couldn't fight the Atlanteans alone, Tharsis fled north to seek help from Sitalces, the vice ruler of another Tharkan tribe. Sitalces scolded Tharsis for acting recklessly, but he agreed to help. He understood that only through unity could the scattered Tharkan tribes hope to resist the Atlantean forces. Sitalces sent messengers to the neighboring tribes calling for the Grand Council to discuss their next steps. This council became a pivotal moment for the Tharkan people as they debated whether to fight or negotiate for peace. During the council, tensions were high. Many blamed Tharsis for provoking the Atlanteans, while others were paralyzed by fear of their powerful enemies. Sitalces, however, calmed the storm. He reminded the gathered rulers of their ancestors' strength, urging them to unite as a single force. Eventually, the leaders agreed on the plan. While Sitalces would send messengers to Atlanteans to stall for time, the Tharkan tribes would prepare for war. They would fortify their villages, gather supplies, and train their warriors. In 2 months' time, they would regroup and strike back. However, Sitalces' attempt to peace failed miserably. When his messengers arrived at the Atlantean camp, enemy demanded unconditional surrender, including the handover of Tharsis. When the messengers couldn't comply, the Atlanteans mutilated them and sent them back as the brutal message. There would be no negotiations. At the same time, the Atlanteans launched devastating raids across the Tharkan lands, enslaving survivors and burning villages to the ground. The Tharkans now knew that they are dealing with a foe unlike they had fought before, one that ruled through fear and terror. Faced with the relentless advance of the Atlanteans, Tharkan called for the massive retreat. He ordered the eastern Tharkan tribes to take refuge under Eagle Mountain, while others would hide in the Almarian forest. The Almarian forest, home to the fierce Almarians, was known for its warlike inhabitants. Divided into the clans, the Almarians were skilled hunters and warriors who fought mostly without armor, relying on agility and their intimate knowledge of the dense forest to defend themselves. With the help of these forest warriors, Tharkan hoped to turn the tide against the Atlantean invaders. As the story of the Atlantean invasion unfolds, we witness fierce battle of survival, with the Tharkan people rallying together in the face of unstoppable force. Their unity, wisdom and strategic alliance would determine whether they could defend their homeland or fall under the yoke of Atlantean tyranny. Stay tuned for the next chapter of this epic saga, where we dive deeper into the battles that shaped the future of Ída. In the prehistoric times of the unknown world, the Tharkans settled on the southern plains with their herds of cattle. However, the Almarians, the fierce nation of hunters and warriors from the Almarian forest, frequently raided their lands, stealing livestock. In response, the Tharkans began migrating to newly built fortified villages for protection. The Tharkan people chose their chieftains based on the wisdom and decisiveness, as they were known to be an incredibly stubborn, proud and impulsive people. They embodied a unique mix of peaceful, pastoral nature of the Vulterans and the wild, warlike ferocity of the Almarians. Physically, Tharkans were shorter than tall Almarians, but their resilience and adaptation to hardship made them a formidable force despite their stature. When the Atlanteans launched their first expedition to the central continent of Ída, they landed on the southern plains, where the Tharkans were the first to experience Atlantean arrogance and the might of their, at the time, world's most advanced military. After a series of clashes, a portion of Tharkan people fled into the Almarian forest, where they regrouped together with the Vulterans, who were also under attack. They launched a counter-offensive. However, the Battle of Lerna ended in disaster. The smaller but highly disciplined Atlantean expeditionary force demonstrated their true power, crushing the coalition army of Tharkans, Almarians and Vulterans. The Atlantean army, as we know from previous accounts, was a combination of the cavalry lancers and heavy infantry, clad in the scale armor, wielding spears, swords and maces forged from orichalcum, a rare metal found only on the Atlantean island. After this catastrophe, the unaccepted alliance of former rivals regrouped to devise new war strategy, while the Vulterans relied on their heavy bronze infantry, which could withstand but not defeat the Atlantean cavalry. The lightly armored Almarians and Tharkans needed better equipment. The core of the Tharkan military forces consisted of peltasts, light skirmishers armed with javelins, wicker shields covered in animal hide, and short double-edged stabbing swords. These weapons sufficient for the border skirmishers and clan feuds, but they were no match for the Atlantean military machine. To survive, the Tharkans, known for their remarkable adaptability, began copying Atlantean scale armor. However, lacking advanced metallurgy skills, they turned to the Vulterans, master of metalworks, who helped them refine their craft. Over time, Tharkans improved upon their designs, incorporating both Atlantean and Vulteran influences, ultimately forging a modernized army that would carve out the greatest empire of the unknown world, the story in the Aquila conquest. Now let's explore how Tharkan warrior from the age of the rise of the Atlanteans appear in my digital illustrations. How did I design these characters, weapons and armor? What historical influences inspired me? And how do world building, storytelling, lore and pseudo-historical military fantasy intertwine? For the initial design of the Tharkan warrior, I drew inspiration from the three real-world Asian civilizations: Scythians for their heavy cavalry, Thracians for their weapons, Iberians for their armor and clothing. By blending these elements, I created the first Tharkan warrior of the reformed army of the legendary King Aquila. They were equipped with scale armor, crescent-shaped shields, javelins, and curved falcata swords. The white eagle became their sacred emblem, a symbol playing a crucial role in the Tharkan history and mythology. However, during my research, I encountered an inconsistency. At the time of the Atlantean invasion, the Tharkans did not have the cult of the eagle, which only emerged centuries later when they migrated under the Eagle Mountain, where the final climatic battle of the story takes place. To correct this, I revisit their early emblem to ram, which suits their stubborn nature. Originally as herds of the sheep and goats, the ram was fitting an authentic symbol for their early culture. For this new warrior concept, I combine various historical influences: the Iberian helmet from the Punic Wars, the straight Iberian sword, ancestor of the famous Roman gladius Hispaniensis, colorful bird feathers and eagle motifs on the helmet, a Scythian bronze belt used for carrying weapons as a warrior insignia, the Thracian peltast crescent-shaped shield and javelins, scale armor inspired by Atlanteans, a Scythian battle axe with ram's head design, a sword pommel shaped like a horse head, referencing the Atlantean noble horses later incorporated into the Tharkan cavalry, a dark cloak useful for cold weather and stealth attacks, bronze helmet horns reinforcing the warrior's imposing presence. As noted in the Byzantine military manual Strategicon, when a soldier looks formidable, he feels confident and inspires fear in his enemy. Psychologically, tactics win battle more than raw individual skill. Suddenly, there was a silence. The sun broke through the clouds, and after the whole day of rain, not a trace remained. But a shining light revealed a horror. Around the lakes of the Lerna lay naked bodies, stripped of their armor. The waters ran red with blood, and victorious Atlanteans marched triumphantly with their plunder. Among the song of birds rose the scream of dying warriors. This was the echo of the Battle of Lerna. Lerna was once wealthy trading stronghold, founded by colonists from Vulteran, but an unknown plague struck the city, driving its people into exile. Crossing the southern mountains, they founded the kingdom of Argos. That was in the distant dawn of civilization, when city-states like Vultera and the rising Tharkan Empire were just beginning to form. By the time of Atlantean expansion, Lerna was already abandoned and cursed. Even the beautiful lakes had turned into the swamps and marshes. And yet here the Atlantean expeditionary army settled in the first year of the war. The Tharkans, driven from their southern plains by Atlanteans, found shelter in the Almarian forest under King Sitalces. The local chief Brennus offered them refuge. Together they wintered and began their resistance. Their first success came when they ambushed the Atlantean cavalry and drove them to flight. This was the beginning of the second year of war. Admiral Anatole sent word to Atlantis, along with slaves and plunder. The Atlantean king Atlas III was pleased. He sent reinforcements across the sea to support the campaign. Soon the Atlanteans struck north into the Vulteran land, but here they found strong fortresses built of massive stone blocks by master builders of Vultera. Unable to breach them, the Atlanteans turned to terror, raiding fields, burning farms, and spreading fear. The Vulteran tyrant Cleon, fearing for his wealth, sent forth his bronze hoplites to oppose them. But as so often in this war, the free nations of Ída underestimated their enemy. By chance, the Vulterans met the vanguard of Tharkan and Almaran warriors. Once enemies, they now found common cause. Sitalces and Brennus had joined forces to resist the Atlanteans, and thus an unplanned alliance of three nations was born. The allies marched towards Lerna, but within their camp there was a discord. The Almarans, blinded by their courage, demanded an attack. The Vulterans hesitated, fearing the city's curse. The Tharkans accused Sitalces of cowardice. Then came rain. Mist covered the land. The Almarans, emboldened by wine, armed themselves and marched out. Against the council of Sitalces, they entered the forest of Lerna. But the Atlanteans were ready. They had prepared their terrain with traps, pits and sharpened stakes. Hidden in the fog, they waited for the moment to strike. Suddenly missiles fell upon the Almarans. Confused, they stumbled in the fog. Atlantean infantry struck from the flank, while elite shock troops crashed into the rear. Many Almarans perished in the swamps and pits. Others fell upon the stakes. Their cry of terror spread out of the forest. Panic spread to the Tharkans. The allied formation faltered. Then came sounds of horns, war trumpets and shells. The Atlanteans emerged from the mist in the close formation, chanting rhythmically. At last, the Vulteran hoplites march forth, their bronze masks hide their fear. Together with Sitalces and Brennus, they tried to rally the broken ranks, but then came the thunder of hoofs. Atlantean cavalry swept onto the flank, gleaming lances pointed to the sky, encirclement and destruction threatened the allies. The camp was unfortified, warriors fled, seeking safety in the mist. The cavalry hunted down like a prey. Only the Vulteran hoplites resisted, forming a square, their spears thrust outward like a hedgehog. The horses dared not to charge them, but elsewhere men were cut down without mercy. When the rain stopped and the fog lifted, the sun revealed horror. From the lakes of Lerna to the plains beyond, the land was covered with the dead. Blood mingled with mud. Atlanteans marched in triumph, victors of the Battle of Lerna. During the Atlantean invasion against the free nations of the central continent of Ída, the mighty Atlantean cavalry met its match, the Vulteran heavy infantry. The Vulterans were a civilization of powerful city-states with their culture and political center in the Vultera. Over time, they expanded to the Fertile Crescent, founding cities like Vea, Rigi, and the trade fortress of Lerna. Their rise to power was driven by large copper deposits in the western mountains, which allowed them to master metallurgy. Eventually, they also discovered gold, becoming skilled artisans and traders. The Vulterans highly valued peace and artistic expression, excelling in the pottery, architecture, and mural paintings. However, their wealth attracted the attention of barbaric raiders, such as the Almarians, who never reached the same level of culture development. The Almarians were fierce hunters and warriors, often raiding Tharkan lands and Vulteran settlements. To defend against these incursions, the Vulterans forged a formidable heavy infantry, blending their metallurgical expertise and economic power. Vulteran warrior was clad in the bronze cuirass, braces, and greaves, wearing a helmet adorned with crest and bird feathers. These fighting in the front lines often wore masked helmets, because give a man a mask, and he will lose his emotions. Their round shields were reinforced with a bronze frame. Their primary weapon was a 2.5-meter long spear with double spearheads, ensuring its effectiveness even if the shaft broke. In close combat, they wield broad swords of various lengths. Fighting in the tight phalanx formation, they created impenetrable bronze wall of shields and spears. This formation proved its worth in the Battle of Lerna, where a coalition of Tharkans, Almarians, and Vulterans was ambushed in the Lerna marshes by smaller Atlantean expeditionary forces. As the coalition fell apart, the Vulterans covered the retreat, holding back the Atlantean cavalry. This sight of their masked warriors terrified the Atlantean horses, causing them to panic and refuse to charge into the Vulteran phalanx. To truly understand the design of this character and my world-building approach, we need to go back to the very beginning, and I started working on my fantasy world. I wrote a story called Aquila Conquest, focusing on the life of the legendary king Tarkaquila, his family, and Battle of Vultera. I want to illustrate all the warriors from this turbulent era, since I love blending real history, armor, and weaponry with various cultures and civilizations. I combine everything together into the unique mix. The name Vultera is derived from the ancient Italian city of Volterra, once known as Velatri, which was inhabited by Etruscans. That's why the Vulteran civilization, culture and warfare draw heavy inspiration from the Etruscans. When designing the first character concepts, I combine Etruscans and Mycenaean influence with the touch of the Roman aesthetics. As with any creative project, whatever you writing a novel, painting illustrations, or building a fantasy world, things evolve over the time. A year ago, when I started working on the rise of the Atlanteans, I took similar approach as I did with Aquila Conquest. Since Aquila Conquest takes place some 500 years after the Atlantean invasion, I look at the later warriors and worked backward, redesigning them to feel more archaic. At the time, the civilizations of Ída were less advanced, almost like children exploring the world, while the Atlanteans were at the pinnacle of technology. Over the time, the victorious nations adopted and copied Atlantean knowledge, shaping their own cultures and warfare. If you pay close attention, you will notice how later warriors, whether Vulterans, Tharkans or Almarians, all influenced and borrowed from each other, but that's topic for another time. The Atlanteans rode majestic, white horses, symbolizing the original purity of their nation before it was tainted by war, greed and their own arrogance. This corruption came as they achieved rapid technological advancement, turning their island into the global superpower. According to latest lore, the Atlanteans arrived on the central continent of Ída during their campaign against the three nations, primarily the Tharkans, Vulterans and Almarians. These nations were drawn into the conflict, but eventually played a crucial role in the defeating of the Atlanteans in the Battle of Eagle Mountain, driving them back into the sea. This pivotal event is recounted in the story of Rise of the Atlanteans. Following the war, much of the Atlanteans' advancement, technology and weaponry fell into the hands of the victors and was distributed among the different nations. However, this eventually led to tensions. Each nation claimed the lion's share of the credit for the victory. Old illustrations depict Tharkan cavalry or Almarian riders charging into the battle on the tall white horses. Interestingly, Tharkans carried traces of the Atlantean blood. After the battle, they captured women from the Atlantean camps who had followed their men into the hope of witnessing the Atlanteans' army conquest of the known world. This led to the theory that the legendary Tharkaquila might have been the last Atlantean king. However, by the time Atlantis was struck by disasters that halted their expansions, culminating in the Great Flood that devastated the known world and erased the Atlanteans from the history. Some descendants of the Atlanteans are said to have survived in the Toltec Mountains, a storyline explored in the prologue of my book. The Toltecs later become central to the story of Prince Tolan, which I am currently developing. Over the years, I have been designing Atlanteans, their culture, history, military, weapons and armor. One theme was remained constant: the sea. Their armor, forged from the rare metal orichalcum, is often shaped to resemble marine creatures, plants and shells. You can see this reflected in my illustrations. One of their defining symbols is the kraken, representing their ambition to seize the world in their grasp and strangle it under their tyranny. Other symbols include octopuses and dolphins, which the Atlantean cavalry used to signify speed and endurance. The original design for the Atlantean cavalry remained consistent, although I have experimented with different looks for various eras and stories. I always return to the tried and true combination helmets inspired by Boeotian design used by Macedonian cavalry during the Peloponnesian War and Alexander the Great's campaigns, styled here to resemble seashells. The breastplates and shoulder and thigh guards were crafted from the metal scales. Cavalrymen were recruited from noble families and wore navy blue cloaks fastened at the right shoulder. Even their horses were adorned with precious metals and in later periods equipped with armor. On the battlefield they wielded long heavy lance. If their lances broke, they switched to the longsword for mounted combat and short blades for close quarter fighting. I believe the original inspiration for these riders was the Atlantean Contarius from the game Age of Mythology. The term Contarii originates from the Greek word for the spear, roughly 4 meters long. Atlantean mounted archers also make occasional appearances, especially during the wars for unifying the Atlantean island, when the fast and mobile army was essential to quelling rebellions. These mounted archers also play a role in the story of Belvessus. During the Battle of Argos, where the protagonist, Castor, lures them into the ambush, annihilates them with a combination of heavily armored Argian hoplites and javelins thrown by Nahari hunters. At the same time, Nahari made a significant part of the population of the newly emerged Argian kingdom. One of the oldest realms of the unknown world of Ída, where the Nahari people reside, at the southern edge of the central continent. This now lost kingdom, inspired by Nubian culture, Zulu warriors and Egyptian civilization, stands as the forgotten monument to the both of wisdom and might of its people. In days long past, the land was submerged beneath the sea, the truth uncovered by seashells found atop the highest peaks. As the water receded, sandy marshes were born. It was in such an era that King Man arose, a young child ruler with sharp mind, uniting the tribes, draining the marshes and founding his kingdom upon oases, where monumental cities of black stone and gold were built. Through the fertility of their land, the Nahari lived in the wealth and peace, their armies unmatched in the desert. Yet to the north the semi-nomadic Gimiri roamed, surviving by raiding the Nahari's camel caravans. Though the Nahari attempt to eradicate them, the Gimiri always vanish into their rocky cities, striking from the cliff sides. Even beyond their borders, the Nahari proved themselves as mercenaries. They fought in the army of King Tharkan in his campaign against the Vultera, serving as auxiliary infantry, but that tale belongs to another day. Between the royal Nahari and Gimiri, there live a distinct people, the Nahari lion hunters. These border dwellers specialized in hunting wild beasts, particularly lions. The Nahari kings called upon them to rid of oases of predators or to capture various creatures, but their true mastery lay in the hunt of the lions. On the far side of the world, when the rising kingdom of Argos was plagued by the cave lions, the Argians turned to the Nahari for aid. In response, a company of Nahari hunters sailed to the Argos and vanished the lions, later capturing them for Argian kings as royal pets. Fascinated by a new land, the Nahari sent for their families, swelling the population of Argos. Tensions soon flared between the two cultures and a revolt ensued. It was Castor, the first Argian king, who quelled the uprising, leading both his heavy infantry and Nahari into the battle of Argos against the Atlantean invaders. With their Iklava spear, the Nahari warriors played a decisive role, hunting down the feared Atlantean cavalry and contributing greatly to the victory. When designing the appearance of these lion hunters, I tried to illustrate their role as hunters. Armed with longbows, arrows, and spears tipped with gazelle horns, they bear ostrich feathers and seashells in their hair. Their bodies adorned modestly with Nahari gold and other trophies. Their curved knives and swords used for skinning are hallmark of Nahari culture and warfare. Some wear crocodile skin armor, and the most revered wear lion pelts, most often the very lions they themselves have slain. Their signature weapon is unusual heavy axe, similar to those used in Africa for breaking stone or perhaps bone. Inspired by works of Herodotus' histories, I have wrote down this lore to echo an ancient tales of Egypt and Libya, with the Nahari standing as the people who both shape and are shaped by the harsh desert and fertile oases they call home. Finally, I want to point out that the lore and world building are constantly evolving. For instance, the Gimiri were originally envisioned as much more civilized people, but today I imagine them more like the Bedouins, Tuaregs, or other desert tribes. During the Atlantean invasion against the free nations of the Ída on the central continent of the known world, the Atlanteans camped in the abandoned ruins of the cursed city of Lerna. Here they fought one of the first major battles of this war against the coalition of Tharkans, Almarians and Vulterans. However, the mystery remains as to what happened to the city of Lerna, why it was abandoned, and how all of this led to the founding of the young kingdom of Argos, thousands of years before the Silurian uprising of Baron Godfrey, before the legendary campaigns of King Tharkan, and even long before the first Atlantean invasion of the known world. There was a time forgotten by most, a time before the great flood swept proud Atlantis from the face of the earth. At the southern tip of the central continent there stood a humble fishing village, a village that would one day be remembered as Argos. And in this young Argian kingdom, inhabited not only by the Argians themselves, but also the people of Nahari, turbulent events unfold, events recorded in the Chronicle of Belvessus. But who were these people who founded this modest settlement, and how did it grow into the heart of the new kingdom? Today we will uncover their story. During the golden age of the Vulteran civilization, the city of Lerna was a shining jewel of trade. Built near the Lernian lakes, it connected east and west and thrived as a hub of culture, wealth and power. But fate turned cruel. A mysterious plague struck the city. Its markets fell silent. Its lakes turned to swamps, and its people were shunned by all. Vultera, their mother city, rejected them. So too did the Tharkans, and neighboring towns, cast out the people of Lerna, were forced into exile. North, east and west were closed to them, and so they marched south, over mountains, through harsh wilderness, until they reached the land known today as Argos. But there fierce cave lions ruled. Many exiles were slain in the bloody encounters. Pressing onward, the survivors finally found safety rock, barren land by the sea. Unfit for farming, they turned to the sea itself. Fishing became their livelihood. Thus the outcasts of Lerna, once Vulterans, renounced their old ways, founded the city of Argos, and called themselves Argians, a small, struggling nation surrounded by mountains, seas and lions. From hardship grew resilience. They built a home of stone and wood, taught themselves shipbuilding, and planted olive groves in rocky soil. The sea fed them, but the lions still threatened their northern borders. Seeking aid, the Argians turned to their former allies, the desert people of Nahari, masters of hunting and survival. Nahari arrived and helped drive back the lions, not to destroy them, but to tame balance between man and beast. From this bond came the Argian symbol, the lion's head. The Nahari grew to love the new land. With the Argians' blessing, they settle and create their own subculture, a state within a state, but unity did not last. In time, a faction of Nahari rose against Argos, overthrowing its steward, yet history remembers his adoptive son, Castor of Argos. Known as Belvessus, the Slayer, Castor escaped Atlantean captivity and returned to reclaim his homeland. He crushed the traitors, restored order, and reformed the Argian army. When the Atlantean invasion came, Castor led his people into the Battle of Argos and triumphed. For his deeds he was crowned the first king of Argos, thus a kingdom was born. Though Argos later faded from the spotlight of history, its legacy endured. It remained neutral during the wars of Tarkaquila and survived untouched by Tarquilan Empire. Centuries later, Argos resurfaced, leading a trade war against the Turan, for trade was the bloodline of the Argians, from the days of Lerna until the end of their story. But that is a tale from another time. Everything in life comes at the right time and in the right place, and so too shall be returned when the story of unknown world continues. This is just a short summary and part of the story Rise of the Atlanteans from my worldbuilding art book. It follows the first part of the book, Prologue, The Rise of the Atlanteans, which you can read in the recent post on my Patreon. And there is another lore video on my YouTube channel about this story. On my Patreon is small preview from my book. It's free to read and will be uploading more parts soon. The story describes early invasion of the Atlanteans on the southern coast of Ída, which sparked conflict among the local people, particularly the Tharkans and Almarians, as they attempt to resist the powerful enemy from the sea. Let me know how you like it and if you be interested in the reading more parts. Of course, I am planning new lore videos about creating my fantasy world, but this will take some time, so I can't promise when it will be. So if you are interested, you can read a few pages from the book ahead of time. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe for more tales of ancient civilization, epic battles and legendary leaders. Let me know in the comments what do you think that Tharkan should have done differently and how they can defeat the Atlanteans in the future battles.